many people enjoy Legos, right? Some of you when you were kids, you played with Legos, and then as the kids grew up and became adults said, we need Legos also. And so the Legos company, they have adult Lego projects nowadays too. If Caleb's watching today, I borrowed some of his set. Our son likes to put them together, and he has some great sets that he puts together, and he spends hours as he pulls them out and puts it all together. And Legos aren't cheap anymore either, right? When they're kids and they're like 5 to 10 years old, you can get away with $10, $20 sets. When your son is 23 and he has all those cheap sets because you've bought them all the way, now they get to be hundreds of dollars for some of these sets up here. And they have sets that cost $600 to $1,000 now that are so many pieces I would get lost. But Caleb enjoys doing Legos, and he enjoys being able to pull them out and put them together. And he sits. It's probably one of the few times he sits still for a while, and he looks over the directions, and he follows each step along the way, and he comes up with these great projects. These are just a few of what he has still at our house. He has some in his apartment too, and you know what? I just hope I don't break them, but I don't feel bad showing them off because he's not here and they're in my house. So it's fair game. But Caleb takes the time to put them all together like that. Last summer, in 2024, we like to, during the summertime, the last 2 summers, we've hosted members of the Glacier Range Riders team and allowed them they stay at our house, and we get free tickets, and we share with some of you during the summer, during the baseball season. And last summer, 2024, we had the first half of summer, we had a radio broadcaster who stayed with us. And he had gotten one of these sets similar to this little flower set here. He had gotten one of these sets like this and was trying to put it together, but he was trying to put it together without following the directions too closely. And he was just pulling pieces out and putting them all and trying to cram them in. And after a couple hours of frustration, he had it about half done and several broken pieces and all that. And then what was funny was Caleb came home and he just fixed it like within 30 seconds, it felt like. But we have those 2 types of people, right? When it comes to putting Legos together, there's those who will follow the directions, and when you follow the directions, you end up with the pieces looking exactly how they're supposed to be. I'm impressed, like this bus here, it even has a roof on it that you can put. Or when you're going on tour in England, I guess you take the roof off and you can sit and see out the top. But they have all that, and then there's some of you that just start putting it together. And maybe it ends up looking like it's supposed to look like, but maybe not. But in order for these to look like exactly how the designers want them to look, you need to follow the directions. And you should end up with all the pieces fitting somewhere and going in there. And that's usually my problem, right? I got a few extra pieces. Where are they supposed to go? But as we continue our series here through the book of James, we get to a point where James is talking to us about the fact that there is arrogance in thinking we can do it on our own, into thinking that we know the design and we know the plan, and so we're just going to start putting the pieces together ourselves and not trust in the designer, not trust in the one who has created it all. And so if you'll turn with me today to James chapter 4, we're going to look at 4 verses 13 to 17. So James 4, starting at verse 13. Pay attention, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a town. We will stay there a year, buying and selling and making a profit. You don't really know about tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for only a short while before it vanishes. Here's what you ought to say. If the Lord wills, we will live and die and do this or that. But now you boast and brag, and all such boasting is evil. It is a sin when someone knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it. The word of the Lord for us this morning. And so James challenges us here that we need to trust in God and put our plans and all of our design work and all the things that we say into action. We need to make sure that we're trusting God with it. Remembering that first, when James is speaking here, James is actually kind of talking to people who who go from town to town working, right? Back in his day, even the Apostle Paul, he traveled from town to town. He not only planted churches, but he would work there. He had a second job, and he would make things and design things. And so James is kind of talking to the crowd that says, well, I'm just going to go here and work for a while. Then I'm just going to go there and work for a while. Then I'm going to go there, and then things will happen. And James is saying, no, we need to put our trust in and make sure that we're not saying, I'm doing this, but I'm going to do it if the Lord wills, if God wills. And so we have a few things that James wants us to unpack a little bit here this morning together. And the first thing we need to look at is the fact that we have our plans, right? Say you go into the store. Like I went on Wednesday, I went into Walmart, and I went and looked through all the Legos, and I decided I wanted to build a Lego set. And so I picked out one, right? I found a nice one about a Mustang, nice blue Mustang, and And so I went and I bought this one, and say you did that. You went and you bought one and you took it home, and what would you do with it when you took it home? Some of you are crazy, and you just start opening it up and ripping everything out. But what's neat about this, and Lego does a great job now, is it comes with a booklet, right? Here's the directions, step-by-step booklet. And in case you can't follow step by step, each step is put into its own little bag with a big number on it. 1. Only open this bag first and put it all together. And then when you're done with 1, you naturally go to 2, right? Don't skip to 4 yet because you're not ready for that. But you go 1, 2. Now some of you would be more likely to take that bag and you set it out on the table, and without looking at the directions, without looking at anything around, you just dump it all into one place, right? You just dump it all into one table, and you go, there's all my pieces. Now I got to figure out how to make this look like the Mustang in the picture. And you spend time frustrated. You spend time just ready to call an end to things. You're ready to break it up or to throw it away or whatever. You're ready just to quit because you're trying to do it all on your own without the help of the design work, without the help in the organization of the box that it came in with all the directions. James is telling us that is basically how some of us try to live our life. That we try to live our life in a way that just says, I'm just dumping it all on the table, and then I'm going to try to put it together and make it look like this blue Mustang. I'm going to try to make it look like this house. I'm going to try to make it look like this airplane here. I'm just going to do and figure it out. But James says that we can't live that way. Look again at verses 13 and 14 from today. Pay attention, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a town. We will stay there a year, buying and selling and making a profit. You don't really know about tomorrow. One of the interesting things about Lego is that it's a hard plastic, right? And most parents, if you're a parent of a kid who has Lego, you know, the bottom of your foot knows it's a hard plastic. And what's neat about Legos, though, is that you can spend hours and hours and put this together. And this has been sitting in my son's room for a couple years now. And other than a little bit of dust, it still looks shiny and bright and exactly how it looked when he put it together. It lasts a long time. But what James is reminding us that when it comes to our life, and it comes to our life that we don't last a long time like this, that in the course of time when Caleb built this thing, he built it in a couple hours, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, I don't know how long he took. It took a couple hours, and then it's lasted for many years since then, and will continue to last until finally we've had enough and we get rid of it somehow. And James wants to remind us that we can't sit there and say, I have plans for tomorrow. I have plans for next month. We don't know how long we have. Only God knows that plan. Look at the way verse 14, I didn't read it at first, but I'll read it now. Verse 14, James asks an important question. What is your life? What is your life? Your life, you are a mist that appears only for a short while, and then it vanishes. In the grand scheme of eternity, in the grand scheme of God's creation of the earth, and then when it comes into everlasting life and heaven or hell and all that eternity, that in the grand scheme of all of that, my life on this earth is only a blip. is only a little bit of time compared to the grand scheme of what eternity looks like. And so James wants to remind us that we need to trust in someone else, not in our own plans and not in our own ways, because what we do now has an effect on us for a long period of time. We find this also kind of mentioned to us in other parts of Scripture. In Psalm 39, verse 5, the writer says, "You've made my days so short. My lifetime is like nothing in your eyes. Yes, a human life is nothing but a puff of air." And then in Proverbs 27, "Don't brag about tomorrow, for you don't know what a day will bring." And so we think about this thing, we think about our plans, and we think about all the things that we have going on, and the realization that it's just a blip of time. And I was thinking about that this week when you think about the fact that even with Caleb, Caleb was in our house for 18 years. And now Caleb has been out of our house for 5 years. And then Caleb will go on to be an adult and go on to hopefully get married someday and have his own family. He has a great start of a career now. And to think back, that 18 years is just a blip compared to the rest of his life. And to think about the fact that then with us, what we have, and we may be going through a rough time right now. We may be frustrated with something that work may not be going as well as we want, or this isn't very well, or whatever, and we realize it's just a short time compared to everything else that we have going on. Even I know we're getting close to winter, and some of you shrivel up at the sound of snow, but even the amount of snow compared to an entire year is a short amount of time, even though around here it feels like it's forever. But it's still just a short amount of time. And so what we need to do is we need to have a new perspective on the ways that we see things around us, the ways that we see our life. And that's what James continues on, that God invites us to see a different way, a way that takes the guesswork out of not knowing who holds tomorrow, of not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. James gives us an answer of where we need to look so that we can find the comfort and the encouragement that we need to keep going. And that is simply found in point number 2, in God's will. In God's will. In order for me to make this Lego set exactly the way that it's designed to, I need to check the box. I need to check the directions. I need to check the little bags and how do they tell me to put it all together. That in order for me to make it exactly how it's meant to be, how the people at Lego designed it to be, I have to follow each and every step. And so in order, for that to happen, then I need to be willing to submit to the fact that there is someone who knows better than me how that goes together. And so we have to remember in our own life that as we go through things, as we go through the ups and downs and all the different plans that we have, we need to make sure that we're checking in with the one who designed it all. We need to check in with the one who has created us, who has designed us to be who we are, given us our gifts and our talents, and has decided that we need to live during this period of time and what we can do with that time. Back to James today in verse 15, says, "Here's what you ought to do. Here's what you ought to say. If the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that." Now, if you put your trust in God, if you say, "God, I believe that you created me, I believe that you love me, I believe that you've forgiven me, I believe that you walk with me each and every day," then when it comes to my plans, I should be saying, "All right, God, if it's your will, this will happen. If it's your will, I will do this, or I will do that." And it sounds kind of funny that way because we're not used to talking that way. But it's having that attitude inside of us that is humble, that says, "All right, God, what is your plan? I can have my plans and I can have my ideas for how I want life to go, but I need to check in with him and say, God, what is your plan? Is this the right way for us?" When I was in Pennsylvania, we heard a excuse me. When I was in Pennsylvania, we'd hear a saying all the time out there, and some of you have heard it around here too, but they would always say to us, we'd be like, "Hey, we'll see you Sunday," and the response often was, "The Lord willing and the creek don't rise," right? Some of you have heard parts of that phrase before, or all that phrase, the Lord willing and the creek don't rise. Basically, a reminder that, I plan to be here Sunday unless God has something else in mind. Unless something else happens to get in the way. And so it's an attitude inside of me of saying, you know what, I would like to do this. I'd like to see you Sunday, but if the Lord has something else in mind, then I'm going to follow what he has in mind, and I'm going to follow his plans for me. And it's a great just a reminder of that, the Lord willing and the creek don't rise. And so inside of us, what James is trying to say is we need that attitude, the Lord willing. If the Lord wills, I will be there. It's not a superstition. It's not something that just is a cop-out of things, but it's a posture of my heart. It's a posture of my heart that says, I will do it, but I want to follow God, and I want to follow God's ways for me. And I know that he has good plans and good things. Even the Apostle Paul, when we read in the book of Acts about Paul's travels, that in one occasion while he was leaving a church, he sent them this kind of farewell. And in Acts 18:21, he says, as he said farewell to them, though he added, God willing, I will return. He also mentions it in Corinth and a few other spots along the way. That's that reminder that our dependence is on God. And the doors that God will open are the doors that God will close, whatever that may look like. It's a dependency on God and his great power and his design and all that he has ready for us and the outcomes that he's designed for us. In Proverbs 16, we read these words of wisdom. People plan their path, but the Lord secures their steps. And so we know that we want to follow God and we want to trust him. We want to trust him with our steps and with our plans. And so when was the last time that you pulled out your calendar? When was the last time you pulled out your calendar and you looked at the things that you had planned for this coming week? I could pull it out. Everything's on my phone these days. So I can pull up my calendar on my phone and I can see the meetings that I have scheduled this week. I can see some of the phone calls I have scheduled, some of the other appointments. And, Friday night, there's trunk or treat. I'll be there, Lord willing. We look at these things, and when was the last time we said, all right, God, here are my appointments. Here is my schedule. Here is my work. Here's what I have to do this week. Please help me to do this, but also, if it's not your will, help me to know so that I know what I should be doing instead. But instead, so many times we run around and our calendar feels like it controls us instead of us controlling it by allowing God to have that voice inside that can veto anything we do. And so God will use us, and God will use the things that we do, and it's a matter of just giving it to him and saying, God, here's my calendar. Here's my plans. Help me to honor you in what I do. One of the things that we're going to do this Friday night with Trunk or Treat is I have purchased 500 pocket Bibles. They're little books of John, basically, for kids. And we're going to hand these out to our kids. Any kid that comes trunk or treating in our parking lot this week, they're going to get a book of John, basically a gospel about Jesus. And the prayer, since I've had these for a couple weeks, and we'll have the rest of this week, my prayer is that as we hand those out, that it's more than about the candy, it's more about the fun that we'll have, it's more about the things that we do, but that maybe this will touch somebody spiritually and take an opportunity for a night that we don't think about church too much on that night. There's a lot of other things that are thought about on Halloween night, I know. But we're going to do our part to try to bring a little bit of light into that time. And we're going to pray that maybe that will touch a kid's life. There'll also be an invitation card in it to come back and join us at church on Sundays at 10:45. But it's that opportunity of praying and saying, God, how can we use what we're doing to show our faith and our trust in you? And how can we tell others about you through that time? And there's danger in it, though. There's danger in ignoring God and ignoring God's plans. There's a danger in deciding to trust in ourselves and in our own energy. And James kind of continues that discussion. And number 3 is there's an arrogance that comes in our planning when we don't include God. There's an arrogance that comes when we don't include God. Sometimes we decide that we know better than the designer. Sometimes I go, well, these pieces don't look quite right. I don't like how that fit together. And so I'm just going to make it how I want it to look. And I'm going to put it how I want it. And then it ends up being wobbly, and it ends up being crooked, and there's 20 extra pieces that don't fit quite right, and it falls apart easily, and life just gets in the way. And so we decide we know better than God, and so there's an arrogance that comes into our heart that because of sin in our life, that selfishness inside of us that thinks we know better than God, there's an arrogance that rises up and tries to keep us from trusting in God, that tries to keep us from following his ways. James talks about this in verses 16 and 17 of today's reading. But now you boast and brag, and all such boasting is evil. It is a sin when someone knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it. I love that last little tagline there, right? It's a sin when someone knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it. So it's a sin when we disobey God. And there are some times where we know sin is sin, right? These are things that are not of God that I'm doing, and it is wrong, and I shouldn't be doing it. But James is adding to that step and going, if you know you should be doing something else, and you decide not to do it, you avoid it, then that's a sin as well, because God has told you to do something. And so if God has talked to you about telling your neighbor about Jesus, and you don't do it, you avoid it, then you are sinning just as much as someone who goes to the store and steals something. That is still a sin when God commands you to do something and you disobey him. It's not a new message. It's not something new with James himself. As a matter of fact, he most likely heard his half-brother Jesus talk about it. He most likely heard Jesus teach about it several times. And the first main place that I thought of this week was Luke chapter 12. And Jesus talks about the parable of the rich man. It says in Luke 12:16, I don't know if I got that in. Did I get that? Oh, good. I did. Thanks. Luke 12:16 to 21. Then he told them a parable. A certain rich man's land produced a bountiful crop. He said to himself, "What will I do? I have no place to store my harvest." Then he thought, "Here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. That's where I'll store all my grain and goods. I'll say to myself, 'You have stored up plenty of goods, enough for several years. Take it easy. Eat, drink, and enjoy yourself.' But God said to him, 'Fool, tonight you will die. Now who will get the things you have prepared for yourself? This is the way it will be for those who hoard things for themselves and aren't rich towards God.'" Now, we could go in a lot of different ways with that parable, but in line with what James is saying today, basically this landowner, he has this huge crop and he decides, well, I'm going to save it for myself. I know that when I have more than I need, I should be sharing with other people, but I'm going to save it just in case we have some bad years. And so I'm going to build a big barn and a big place to store it all, and that way I will be taken care of in case there's bad year next year. And then God says, well, you don't know how long your life will be. And God says, well, you did all that work. You were selfish and you hoarded it all to yourself, but tonight is your last night on earth, so it didn't matter. It didn't make a difference. And so the scheme here is that idea that this man has decided that he's going to keep it all to himself instead of knowing he should be sharing, knowing he should be looking out for his neighbor, and really not knowing what was next. He presumes the control of plans. He's arrogant in what he decides to do. And so the idea for us is that we don't know how long this life will last. We've talked about that already, that it's a puff of air. It's just a vapor, and it's just very small compared to the grand scheme of God's plan for eternity. And so we need to make sure that we are going away from that selfishness and that arrogance that sin likes to have in us, so that we look for the ways of God, and we know then what our foundation needs to be as we move forward. And number 4 is we need to build that foundation. We need to build it with faith. When I finally decide to try this Lego set out, when I finally will sit down and put it all together, I will follow the directions in the book, and it will turn out exactly how the picture shows on it. It will turn out exactly like this. put all the stickers in the right place and all the different things, it will turn out exactly like this because I have put my trust in the one who designed it. I have put my trust in the people of Lego that they put together quality products and that everything is put together for me. And so that I can do what's then needed. And that's when it comes out correctly. That's when these things all, this thing, Tony and I were looking earlier, there's a latch here somewhere where you can pull the latch and the thing drops and there's little blue Legos that fall out like water, like it's dropping off the water over a fire. And Christy gets all these nice little flowers that Caleb makes, and it looks a lot nicer than it does, and they look like they're supposed to. I was impressed with this, again, that has the roof for when it's raining. But it's that idea that when I follow the directions, and when I do every piece correctly, that yes, it takes time, and it takes concentration, but when I do all that, then it turns out to be exactly how it's supposed to be, as opposed to just trying to pull a bunch of, I don't even know how these Duplos got in here, but somehow they got to fit, right? But you pull all that together, and then you're trying to do it all yourself, and it takes a lot longer. It's a lot more frustrating when we try to do it ourselves. But we have one who has given us a foundation, one who has already designed the things around us, the one who has created it all. And so we're called to put our trust in him and say, I will trust you with how you have built things around me. I will trust you in the ways that you have created everything. I will trust you because you love me, because you created me to be who I am, uniquely made with my gifts and my talents, with me being able to fit in where I live now. And I always think when people talk about, if we lived at a different time, or even think about, if I lived in Africa, my life would be so much different. I wouldn't know that because I would live then at that time and in that way. And so all we know is how we live now. And the one who designed it all, created for us to live at this time to help make a difference for his kingdom. That there is a God who loves you and he wants you to pour from his foundation. He wants you to begin with his foundation and start there to build the rest of your Lego life so that you can then trust him and you can live the life that he created for you to live. Jesus talks about the consequences of poor foundations. In Matthew chapter 7, we read about the wise builder. In Matthew 7, 24 to 27, he says, everybody who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise builder who built a house on bedrock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the wind blew and beat against that house. It didn't fall down because it was firmly set on bedrock. But everybody who hears these words of mine and doesn't put them into practice will be like a fool who built a house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the wind blew and beat against the house. It fell and was completely destroyed. Jesus calls the obedient person a wise builder who sees the ways of God and builds his life on God, on the bedrock. That when storms come and when hardships come and frustrations come, that we may feel it in our life, but it's not blowing us over. It's not toppling us. It's not destroying us because we know that God is there and God will provide for us and he'll take care of us. And so we don't have to live with that self-reliance anymore. We can live with the fact that God is there and we put our trust in him. To live with an attitude of if it's the Lord's will. That when we live with that, we build on that foundation for our life, then we see how he works and we see the trust that we can have. We see how he has provided for us. We take the time to praise him for the things that happen around us. Even if you don't like the fall, you can still praise God because we know that God shows in the cycle of creation through the seasons that God takes care of and provides for animals and plants all along those ways. And so why can't he take care of us? And so we see how that goes. Even in the dormant winter season, he's still providing and still allowing for things to happen so that new growth can happen in spring. And so James is reminding us that we need to shift our focus from our plans to his will, to his plan. When you plan your next step in your career, maybe the first response should be, if it is the Lord, if the Lord wills. When you're setting your goals for what you want to have accomplished this year. When you get ready in January to do New Year's resolutions, because I know we all do them and we all keep them. Instead of saying, I want to do this or I want to do that, we say, what does God want us to do this year? If the Lord wills, I will do this year. When you're making plans for your family, when you're making plans for a dream that you have of one day, maybe it's retirement or maybe it's living in a certain place, that the question shouldn't be, I'm going to do this, but if the Lord wills, I will do this. This isn't fatalism. This isn't me being just pushing the blame somewhere else, but it's me allowing faith to grow me. It's faith allowing me to see that I have confidence in the one who has created it, the one who has designed it, the one who has put the pictures together and put all the Lego blocks into a box and said, here, this is your life. This is what I have for you. That when we build on that kind of faith, when we build on the fact that God loves us and God has a plan for our life that is good and holy and loving, that even when the bad things happen, that's our foundation that we don't get moved from. And so as we look at our calendars, as we look at our plans for the year, as we look at what is going on around us, are we laying our foundation on the designer? Are we laying our foundation on the God who loves us, the master builder? So then that way, as we go through this life, as we build the things around us that we build, and it's not wrong to have the plans, but we must include God in them. And as we see all that come around us, and we can look back and go, look at what God has done through us. Look at what God has done with us. Look at how God has used us. If the Lord wills, we will live and do this or do that. And we can say with confidence that God does love us and that God does provide for us and that He has a great design for us, that even sometimes our life looks like this bucket of odd pieces. That life looks like this bucket that is just a bunch of stuff thrown together. They're all Lego pieces. They're all from various sets. But God looks at all those pieces and He helps design them and put them together for us so that we can then look back and see how He's provided and taken care of us. And so this morning, as we enter into our reflection time together and we sing this song together, maybe think about some of the things that you have going on in your life, some of the plans that you have. Have you included God in your plans? Have you included this important phrase, if the Lord wills? Have you given Him that authority in your life and that trust in your life? And so, if not, take the opportunity to ask God to show you how to do that. Put your trust in Him, confess your trust in Him, and start to do that. And so please stand as we sing this song together. If you need to take a few moments to come and pray at our altars, feel free to come and kneel before God and talk to Him about it. If it's just sitting where you are and praying there, that's fine too. What's important is that you're taking a moment as you head out into the busy rest of the week, taking a moment to say, God, I want to build my life on You, and I want to put my trust in You. Help me to do that. After we're done with this song, I will close us in a time of prayer together.